If you love to be scared to death with a good horror movie or simply appreciate the art of film, you won't want to miss the next few minutes. You've found Uniquely Bristol, the show that highlights the hidden treasures and small-town values of Bristol. This show is produced by the Bristol Development Authority. Since the early 60s, the East Coast connection to Hollywood has been the Witch's Dungeon Classic Movie Museum, run by Cortland Hull. I recently had the pleasure of sitting down and discussing the movie museum with Cortland.
One of the things that I find just amazing is that growing up outside of Kansas City, the highlight of my week was waiting for Saturday night when Chiller Theater came on. But you started this when you were 13 years old.
Well, that's right, but I also had the help of my great uncle, which was actor Henry Hull, who was the very first movie werewolf, The Werewolf of London, in 1935. And through him, I got to meet some wonderful makeup artists, such as John Chambers, who did this makeup of Roddy McDowall from Planet of the Apes, the original Planet of the Apes, and others.
Now, Henry wasn't the only kind of movie star. You also had, I think it's an aunt or a cousin?
Yes, my great aunt was Josephine Hull, which was his sister-in-law. And so you can actually say that in my family, my uncle was a werewolf and my aunt was a murderess.
Well, we're lucky this is not being taped during the full moon. So I'm trying to think, I know that you started this as a child, and I used to love to make the Aurora models, the monster models, and I know that inspired you. So was it the models? Was it your uncle? I mean, where's the passion come from?
It was a number of different things. I was fascinated by the makeup in the films to begin with, and my great uncle, he was also a wonderful makeup artist in his own right on stage. So he kind of encouraged me with that, but it was like what you did. I built the little Aurora model kits, which were about 8 inches tall, but they were only 8 inches tall. It's hard to be frightened of something that's that small. That's why I wanted them life-size. And so the only way to do that, I had to get to know some of the makeup artists that actually worked on these movies, and that's where that aspect came in.
Well, you're a Bristol native. That's a long way from Hollywood. How did you kind of connect with these people to learn this? Because, I mean, these are magnificent.
Well, it was because of my great uncle and his connections with Hollywood. He also co-starred in a movie called Master of the World with Vincent Price. And so that's how Vincent entered into this as well. Vincent did voice tracks for The Witch's Dungeon, which you still can hear to this day.
Right.
Welcome, poor mortal, to this witch's dungeon of nightmares.
This was kind of a family affair because your whole family helped you kind of make your dream come true, didn't it?
Oh, yes. I mean, let's face it, at 13, I couldn't have done it alone. So my dad was a painting and decorating contractor. He built the original building that we had for the Witch's Dungeon. My mom was a Broadway costume designer, and she made many of the costumes for it. And then my uncle was an electrician, so I had a crew to begin with.
Well, that's great.
To start with.
That's great. This is the most unfair question. I know you've been asked it, but you had to have some favorites. I mean, there's so many great horror film, if you will, actors, Bela Lugosi, and all of them. Do you have a favorite, and why?
It's really hard to say, but with all due respect to Uncle Henry, my favorite film always was the Lon Chaney silent Phantom of the Opera, and that was because as a kid, it was the first film I had on film, and you have to realize this was before the day you put a little silver disc into a machine. These were on film, and so this was an 8mm, and way back, and that was the first complete movie I had on film. I must have ran that over and over and over again. So it became my favorite, and the makeup still, to this day, even though that was 1925 when that film was made, it has not been topped as far as the Phantom of the Opera.
When we first started back in the 60s, I mean, it was kind of a prelude to the Wax Museum, wasn't it? I mean, we have busts here and some of this, but you had full-life figures.
In the old wax museums years ago, if they said they had a chamber of horrors, it was not like Nosferatu or the Frankenstein monster. It was torture devices. And to me, that wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted to see the classic movie monsters. So since no one was doing it, I figured I should do it.
Well, and I think this is great because this is really an appreciation of an art, maybe a lost art with some people. It's not about scaring people and coming up. It's really about telling a story Granted, the characters are a little bit different, but it really is something. Tell us a little bit, because this is kind of the precursor to a lot of the great movies.
Absolutely. This is Nosferatu. It was played by an actor by the name of Max Schreck. And that was in 1922 in Germany. And this inspired a lot of other films. Even, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Salem's Lot on TV. The vampire looks almost identical to this. And he inspired, that makeup inspired a lot of others. Of course, this was before Bela Lugosi played Dracula in the films. It was about 10 years before. What we offer is something very different than what anybody else offers. It is really mainly about the movies. That's why we call it a movie museum, because as you come in our main lobby, we have original displays of actual movie props, such as this is one of the original golden idols from Raiders of the Lost Ark that was actually used in the film. There were only about 4 or 5 of them made for the movie. But we also have original props from Close Encounters, E.T., Beneath the Planet of the Apes, The Exorcist. We have had one of only 2 in existence of Linda Blair as the Exorcist. So there's a lot to see even before you take the main tour. Then the main tour is really our Wax Museum tour, and that's recreated scenes from the classic horror films.
You can't really tell it on television, but these are so lifelike. Take us through some of how this is done. I mean, this has to be real hair.
It is. It is actually real hair. And some of it is a combination of what's called yak hair. There's an animal by the name of the yak.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, Henry, because he was supposed to be a werewolf, that's actually yak hair that's on him. But on Cornelius here, Roddy McDowell, that's actually real human hair that's on that.
You love this. You obviously had the connections. Why didn't you move out to Hollywood and become one of these guys?
Well, I had the opportunity one
sure
time with John Chambers. He wanted me to be his assistant, but all my friends were here. I mean, I have a number of friends out in the West Coast, but I thought it would be fun to do this museum here because there's nothing like it on the East Coast. So that's how it kind of came about.
It's a reoccurring find that I see in Bristol is that people love Bristol and they don't leave. They really do. Yeah. Let's talk about this guy. Everybody's going to know him, but this is new for this year, isn't it?
This is new for this year. Again, he's a recreation. That's Yoda, of course, from the film, which originally the voice and the puppeteering was done by Frank Oz, who was best known for working with Jim Henson and the Muppets. And so he's our newest recreation that's at the Witch's Dungeon this year.
Now, I know that people are watching this and it's during October, so this is the perfect time for you. Tell us a little bit about the hours of operation, how they can come see this, because I know they're going to want to see this just like I did. So, so tell us about what they can expect to see when they come, and you know, the hours and that type of thing.
Well, first of all, I should say you should go to our website because that'll have all the key information. That's www.preservehollywood.org. Preservehollywood.org.
What a great URL. Yeah.
So that is the main one you can go to for any questions. But beyond that, we're open every single weekend in October, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday evenings, 7 p.m. till 10 p.m., including Halloween weekend. We go from Friday night straight through to Tuesday night, which is Halloween. So we'll be open every night that weekend right up to Halloween.
But you've had everybody from Elvira to Mark Hamill to Vincent Price. I mean, that's got to be gratifying. And how do those people come to you, and what do they ask you and talk to you about?
Well, I think it's because that they knew that I was related to Henry Hull, but also they have a great affection for the fact that I'm trying to preserve and bring this to new generations that, you know, with CGI now, there's not going to be anything for anybody to see as an actual object. It's all numbers.
It's a lost art now.
Yeah, so being able to see the pioneers that created all this and how it began, I think, especially for film students, this is a great place to be able to go. And also, we show films, real films. We don't show digital. We show actual movies.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, you do this through October. I know it takes months in advance, but you kind of keep this spirit up throughout the year here at the Bristol Historical Museum. Tell us a little bit about that and how people can come and actually see the real thing.
Well, every 2 weeks generally, you'd have to check with our schedule, we do run actual movies right here at the Bristol Historical Society, and it's either, sometimes we have a double feature, like the old days, or we'll have a main feature and then we'll have, say, an episode of Flash Gordon or an episode of the Three Stooges or cartoons, because we want it to feel like an old-time night at the movies. And a lot of these programs you couldn't see anywhere else.
Can you share with us what may be coming or one of the things you're sought after to try to go get for the upcoming years?
Well, we hoped that we would have had one of the original 1966 Batmobiles just for one of the weekends.
Right.
We're still hoping that'll happen, but it's so popular, especially after Adam West passed away. We're not sure if we'll have it this season, but we'll definitely have it for next season. And some of them that we're adding next year probably would be Frederick March as Mr. Hyde, and we're going to lean a little more towards science fiction, and we may do Flash Gordon and Ming the Merciless in the following year.
There's lines all the time through it, so the popularity is not dying whatsoever, is
Oh,
it?
no, we have a long line out here, but it moves faster now.
It does.
I want to say that. Don't think you have to wait for a long, long time. It moves faster because we're in a much bigger location, and we can get more people in on the tours at a time. Plus, we have 2 live tour guides, and I've been told that we're the only ones, at least in this country, that have live tour guides.
And I'll tell you what, it's worth the wait. Cortland, congratulations. Thank you. You certainly are a gem for Bristol, and we appreciate it.
I see you have survived this maze of monsters and nightmares, or have you? And so until we meet again, good night.
Welcome to Bristol. Nestled in the heart of Connecticut, just 2 hours from Boston, New York, and an hour from the shoreline, Bristol offers a unique New England experience.
City size with small town vibe, you'll fit in no matter your pace.
As a community, we're rich with history, overflowing with passion, and ripe with experiences to enjoy. Beyond the rolling hills of Connecticut, that's where you'll find the magic of Bristol.
With an incredible 700 plus acres of park systems,
Inspiring museums and cultural programs,
and the oldest operating amusement park in North America.
Our arts and entertainment will color you convinced.
And local food and drink establishments to keep you excited, satisfied, and always savoring more.
Community events that leave a lasting memory.
We really do have it all.
plus, we're a community that honors the brave.
A community that offers top-tier sports and recreation.
And world-class accommodations to suit every style.
But what if you wanted to stay even longer?
Well, there's neighborhoods to pair with any personality.
And places for all kinds of producers.
Top-rated school systems.
Ways to make an impact.
And plenty of places to worship.
So whether you're vacationing,
Passing through,
Or staying a little longer.
bring your heart to Bristol. Our heart is always open to your experiences. Bristol, Connecticut.
All heart.
We all know fires can happen at any time, but during October, Fire Prevention Month, we pay special attention. One of the hidden treasures of Bristol is the Bristol Firefighters Museum. It's a collection of firefighter history by Hap Barnes. And if you keep watching and you're a Bristol resident, you may qualify for a free smoke alarm. We'll talk about that later.
The Bristol Firefighters Museum is truly a gift of love for the city. It's located on the second floor of the New England Carousel Museum.
So this is Kathy Mitchell, who knows a lot about the Bristol Firefighters Museum, and it really has a lot of history going way back and some serious Bristol complications in fires, right?
That's correct. That's correct. We have photographs from back into the late 1800s up till the 1980s. And what's kind of interesting about the photographs is that sometimes when we have people come in, they'll look at a picture and say, is that Uncle John? And they'll look close and say, yes, that's Uncle John. You know, he worked from 1941 to 1961 at the Bristol Fire Department, and the different apparatus and how it advanced through the years from the horse-drawn to actual trucks, and the pictures are magnificent.
Do we know any of the major fires that are on this wall?
This particular one right here is a Union Street fire, which I personally remember, and that's from 1988. And how that started was they were renovating and they were using tar paper, and someone was grilling, and a spark came and that tar paper just went up. And thankfully, I mean, it displaced a lot of people, but no one got hurt.
Yeah, no, you can always replace buildings.
That's right, that's right.
A lot of great memorabilia on this wall with axes. I mean, this, if you had to say fire department, if you didn't have the truck, the axes and all of that really are some. Tell me about these hats if you can.
They're called parade hats, and when there was a parade, the firemen would use them with their dress-up uniforms. And of course, the hoses, you know, these were used for, they would be put in a lake for, and the water drained from the lake for a fire.
Come a long way.
Yes, it has.
And this was probably one of the first, I guess, longer distance hoses.
Yes, this is a water cannon that was on the back of a fire truck, and of course it moves every which way. Attach the hoses here, and on the other side of the museum is a fire cannon that was used in the New York Harbor on a boat. So again, the hose would be put in the water and hooked up and pumped through there from the actual Hudson River or wherever it happened to be.
I'll tell you one thing, Kathy, that strikes me about the museum is it really kind of gives you a history of how far we've come in fighting fires. Like, you know, this is the way it used to be. What is all of this?
This is actually from the early 19th century equipment that they use. Some was horse-drawn, some was, some of the pieces were steam, which they used coal or wood to fire up the steam engines. But this piece here is quite interesting. As you can see, it's a ladder. And if you look way up at the top, it's a hook. Now, back in the late 1800s, that was known as a hook and ladder.
Right. Well, we didn't have the big trucks with the sky cranes and the large ladders. So, I mean, I always wondered where that term came from.
What they did actually with this ladder and hook is they would sit on the edge of a windowsill, as depicted in this picture, and they would hook that hook onto the second story and climb up. And then again, unhook it, go to the third floor, and that was their hook and ladder back in the late 1800s. You
know, it's dangerous to fight fires now with all the modern equipment. You can only imagine if somebody had to, you know, hang out of a window to fight a fire. Exactly. You'd have to have pretty good courage.
Exactly, exactly.
You know, Kathy, I think this says everything in a nutshell, the evolution of kind of how far we've come, this display of all the different trucks.
You have your old-fashioned from the late 1800s right up to, I'm going to say in the 80s, 90s, 2000. I mean, they're a little more modern than this particular one, but it gives a good history of the fire trucks.
The interesting thing with all this technology, it's still the basics, like smoke alarms that still prevent fires. Let's talk about how you might be able to get a free smoke alarm if you're a Bristol resident.
From the past to the future, Bristol firefighters answered the call last year almost 2,400 times and fought 256 fires. The best way to battle a fire is to prevent it. Each October, fire crews routinely make the rounds to our schools, giving tours and tips on how to prevent fires. This year it's even better because Bristol has received a federal grant to give and install smoke and CO2 alarms to qualifying Bristol residents.
Well, I think everybody since their school days knows that October is Fire Prevention Month, and I'm here with Bristol Fire Chief Jay Kolakowski, and even though we should be safe all year round, we kind of take time in October to make sure that we're safe, and this one's kind of special, isn't it, Chief, because Bristol residents may be able to get a free smoke alarm.
That's true, Mark. We're about 6 months into a 2-year program that is funded by a FEMA grant that we received late last year that will possibly give up or at least 3 smoke detectors and CO detectors to residents of 1 and 2 family homes in the city of Bristol.
That sounds good. So how does somebody qualify for these smoke alarms?
The basic qualification is, like I said, a 1 and 2 family home within the city of Bristol Most of them have to be built prior to 1986, and at 1986 is when the building code changed in the state of Connecticut to require hardwired smoke detectors in those homes.
Now, give us the process, because this is really unique, because the homeowner really calls, qualifies, and then your guys take over. So take us through that whole process.
It's as easy as it could possibly be. You do call our fire prevention division and speak with our assistant Kim, and that number is 584-7964, extension number 4. You speak with her anywhere between the hours of 10 and 2 usually, and what she does is ask you a couple quick questions, make sure you qualify for the program, and then she gives that homeowners or tenants information to one of the local firehouses in the area, and they'll be contacted by that firehouse and set up an appointment for an installation.
Okay, so your crew gets to the house. What happens after that?
So once the appointment is established, that company comes out to their home and they introduce themselves to the homeowner. They go through the house a little bit. The company officer usually explains the whole process to them again, the program to them again. They have them sign a waiver or release it for the Bristol Fire Department. And then what they do is they do a little walkthrough of the house and they establish where the best locations for the smoke detectors and CO detectors will be. While they're doing this, they also do a courtesy home safety check, not just for fire safety, but for general safety in the home too, and point out any good points that the people are following as far as fire safety, but also anything that might be deficient and they could correct very easily and make them safer.
All right, Justin, one of the things we go through is the kitchen, and we point out any obvious fire safety hazards we come across and just safety items in general. This thing catches my eye right away. It's over the burner, so you want to keep this far away from the stove.
Okay, something else we noticed, Justin, on our walkthrough. If you do use this as a wood-burning appliance, we want to make sure you keep your furniture at least 3 feet away and anything else combustible too. So like all of these things, we try and find a place for and move this out of the way somewhere too. Right, while we're using it, not a safe place to keep it.
Now these are really advanced smoke and CO2 alarms. I mean, explain a little bit about where you would have just a plain smoke alarm converse to maybe a multiple smoke alarm.
Well, these smoke detectors themselves are more advanced than what we were used to when we first started seeing them in the business. As a matter of fact, when I first came on the department, it was very rare to see smoke detectors in houses. But all smoke detectors, including these, are good for 10 years. They have a 10-year life. The difference with these smoke detectors and CO detectors is that they have a 10-year battery life. So you might remember every year during Fire Prevention Month, and usually when we change the clocks again in the spring, we remind residents and homeowners to change the batteries in their smoke detectors. They won't have to do that with these detectors. The difference between the detectors, there's basically 3 different kinds. There's the ionization detector, which detects a fast-moving or flaring fire. There's a photoelectric detector that detects more of a smoldering type fire. And then there's, of course, the CO detector, which detects CO, which is a fairly common problem now that detectors have become more common in houses.
Is there any kind of time frame that we need to make sure that people get a hold of you to qualify and get these smoke alarms, installed?
Mark, the sooner the better, really. There is no real time frame other than the length of the program itself, which will expire in about 9 months now, or a year and a half. But the sooner the better, because the whole goal of this program is to educate people in 1 and 2 family homes and also to get them protected.
We really appreciate that you tuned in to Uniquely Bristol. I'm Mark Thomas. If you want to give us your comments, we'd love to hear from you. Give us an email at marketing@bristolct.gov. And if you want to know more about Bristol, log on to www.bristolallheart.com. And we really hope that you would follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Until next month, thanks so much. I'm Mark Thomas, and that's this edition of Uniquely Bristol.